It's time for the Post-Mortem Report with your hosts Ronald McGilray and Michael Schotter. Each month, these sultans of speculative fiction take a break from bending reality to ask one burning question. What cool stuff got buried in the social media graveyard while people were busy yelling at each other? Well, there's only one way to find out, so let's dig into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Post-Mortem Report. I'm your co-host, Michael Schotter.
And I'm Ronald McGilvery.
You ready to do this crazy thing again? You think your internet's going to hold out?
I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but you never know. Up in Canada, it's never the best kind of internet here.
Well, you've had some little upgrades and stuff to your own personal setup, right? So that should help your cause.
I'm hoping so. I've tried everything to try to pump it up a bit because we've been having nothing but problems lately. So today they're supposed to be working on the street on something that they've found. So hopefully I'll have, steady, input from now on. But it just keeps crashing like every half hour. Only for a minute though. Only for a minute. Like you'll just lose connection and then it'll come back up. It's a bizarre scenario, but I think there was a big glitch after Rogers had their big crash for 24 hours. So we'll see.
I blame mole people.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like a valid potential cause.
They broke the internet.
Yeah. Well, they heard that we were going to do it, and they're like, "Here, hold my beer." So this is episode 2. For those of you counting, I have relocated to my secret bunker. I feel it's a little more safe here. I feel like, there's less chance of something sneaking up on me. I think it's a good move.
I'm in the same place, in
Nice.
my comfortable chair.
Well, you will be our beacon of consistency.
There you go.
Yeah, I'll be the chaos factor. So speaking of chaos, why don't you dig up some birthdays for us, because we got some new things to celebrate this month.
Yeah, there's a few birthdays. Steve Stred, his birthday is July 21st. He's the author of his new one is The Mastodon, which is out now. Father of Lies, which I've read, which is it's a great trilogy. Ward Mallon, his birthday this month as well. He's an Ottawa buddy. He's always, you'll see him on the forums talking up with different horror people. So a shout out to Ward. Tim Lebbon, birthday July 28th. His new book is out, The Last Storm. I don't know if you've seen the posts that have been popping up here and there on that one. It's a post-apocalyptic book.
Oh, nice. I like a good post-apocalyptic vibe. That's although like the past couple of years, that's felt a little too close to home in some respects. But in the right headspace, that can be there.
Yeah. So happy birthday to all three of them. Hope it's a great year ahead for you.
Excellent. I always like to mention too that, we know that there are a lot of other folks who are having birthdays and anniversaries and stuff, but we're only 2 guys. We do what we can. If we see your stuff go by, we will definitely shout it out though. But the internet being what it is, we have to make choices.
That's all. I blame it on the algorithms. It's the ones that I see.
Yeah, well, and that's the funny thing, right, about especially things like Twitter, because depending on it's real easy to fall into sort of like a Twitter rut, right, where it's like, oh, you like somebody's post, and then all of a sudden, for the next 6 months, all you see are their posts. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but if you're following like hundreds or in some cases thousands of people, it really does kind of become a numbers game to a certain extent, right? Like what pops up on your feed. I know sometimes I purposely go and like dig around, just to try to find stuff that I might have missed, because as good as these systems can be, I think they're sometimes a little bit flawed or biased in ways
Yeah.
that might or may not be intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes I look and I go, someone will come up and I'll be like, oh, I haven't seen him in a while. And then it makes me think of somebody else. And I'm like, why haven't I seen a post? So I'll search their name. And then I see there's been like posts daily. And I'm like, well, how come I haven't seen any of them? But I mean, it's, I don't know. I can't figure out the whole algorithm thing. Just a roll of the dice.
Yep. Yeah. Social media is pretty much a big old roulette wheel.
Yeah.
So I noticed that you had put another anniversary on the list this month that I was pretty excited to talk about. You wanna hit us up with that one?
I came across someone that I follow, Gregory Lamberson. He posted up one on for the Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. It's their 50th anniversary, which makes me feel really old.
Right?
Because
How
I saw
crazy is that?
when I was a kid, and I saw the post and I was thinking, my God, I said, it's 50 years. I mean, I loved that series. But so shout out to Gregory Lamberson, by the way, because it was a cool post and brought back a lot of memories. He actually just finished Guns of Eden and is putting together a new film right now too. So wishing him best of luck. Oh, I have a prop for you too, just to show that I wasn't lying.
Oh,
Here's my box set of the original ones.
very
I do
nice.
have the newer ones. At first, I wasn't all that keen on the newer ones, but because I'm a traditionalist. But when you put the new ones in before the originals, it's better because have you seen all of them?
So I've seen Rise of the Planet of the Apes of the new
Okay.
ones, but I haven't
Yeah.
seen the two subsequent ones yet.
Yeah. So if you kind of look at the newer ones that they've just put out, it's kind of like a prequel to the original series.
Well, that was what really attracted me to it, right? When I first saw the trailers for Rise, I'm like, that's a really cool idea to actually show how it became, the Planet of the Apes. Like,
Yeah.
because that really isn't super addressed in the originals, as I recall.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at first there was a lot of, well, not hold, but it was kind of like, well, the end. I mean, I don't know. You can't really do a spoiler now. It's a 50th year anniversary. So if you haven't seen it, get on board. But, at the end, the big ending, when Charlton Heston hits the beach and you're kind of like, oh, wow, and it's, but, how it all transpired, was always kind of up for speculation. And so
that was one of the things that really disappointed me about the Mark Wahlberg reboot that they tried to do in 2001, because I felt like they didn't really bring anything new to the table with that, right? Like it was like, yeah, we're going to reboot this and we're going to kind of twist it up a little bit, but it didn't really bring anything new to the table. Whereas I thought with Rise, it was really cool because everything that was in that movie was its own sort of tangent, but still being in that sort of universe and being sort of true to what the original films had established, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
I don't know why I never watched the other two new ones. I just kind of didn't get around to it, but I am interested in seeing them at some point.
Yeah. I was thinking to myself, I should sit down and watch the whole series, but there's so many things to watch these days that it's, to go back. I will one day. It's,
I just always remember that scene. I think it's Escape from the Planet of the Apes where they come to like 70s, New York or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget if it's like a time travel element or exactly what's going on there. But I just remember these scenes of like Roddy McDowall like walking around in his full like ape regalia with like bad 70s like pimp suit on.
Yeah, it was because I think they were escaping when the nuclear bombs went off, like they managed to just get out before the world was kind of destroyed or whatever, and they went through a time loop or whatever. I guess the opposite hole from where the astronauts had come to them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because I think that later in the series, then the time loop kind of sets the whole for like battle for the Conquest and everything. It's
Yeah, I was watching that trailer for Conquest because I of course this whole thing sent me down this enormous rabbit hole, right? Where I just literally spent an hour or two looking at Planet of the Apes stuff after you sent me that post. And I was watching the trailer for Conquest, and I had totally forgotten that Ricardo Montalban was in that movie. And B, I forgot how awesome that one scene where Roddy McDowell's there as Caesar and he's talking about like waiting for the downfall of man. Like that speech is awesome, even still today. Like I was like, man, I need to rewatch that movie.
Yeah,
because it has been a minute since I've seen it.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's I remember when I got the box set, I sat down to watch them all, but I can't even, it's been so long, I can't even remember when I got it.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, I was definitely like in a collector sort of phase at one point with DVDs where I would just like get them thinking I'm going to watch this at some point. And I literally had like, I think I got to a point where I probably had like 20 or 30 of them like still in the shrink wrap. And I was sort of stopped myself and was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you buying all these things you're not actually watching? And that kind of put a stop to that. But it's easy to fall down that rabbit hole too.
Yeah. What's so hard now with streaming? There's like so many series. There's so many like movies, and it's. But I use my DVDs, especially now that my internet's continually crashing. I have backup DVDs, so if I'm about to watch something that crashes, I'm like, oh, whatever. I have this DVD I was going to put, and I throw it in and watch it. So
nice. Well, speaking of watching things, I think we have another very important message that we need to make people aware of, because I feel like, we helped a lot of people last month, and I think it's time to help some more.
Who wants pizza?
When I get a serious craving for something I want to eat, I need some cheese, tomatoes, and olives, and maybe even some meat. I need some pizza. Every time I want that pizza. I go to David's Pizza.
David's Pizza, 209-477-2677.
Pizza.
So I really wanted to show everybody that because it kind of made me smile immediately as soon as I saw it. And our next topic's a little bit sad because we did birthdays and anniversaries and stuff, but then you had also sent me a link to some unfortunate passings that we've had this year, which kind of sent me down another rabbit hole, which we'll talk about once you let the people know who we've lost in recent months.
Yeah, it was. I heard each one individually, but there was that one post that put it together, sort of three of them, and it really sort of hit home. So with the whole sort of mafia theme, because we lost in Ray Liotta from Goodfellas, James Caan from Godfather, and Tony Sirico from Sopranos. I was a fan of all three movies, watched all the Sopranos, and not as a spoiler, but Tony was like the last man standing almost in the Sopranos, and now in real life. But it's just theme wise, it was a strange.
Well, there's that old saying that celebrity deaths come in threes, right? I don't know if you've ever heard that. It's sort of like one of those 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon situations where you hear that thrown around sometimes. And I immediately thought of that when I saw that post. I'm like, oh, there's the threes thing again.
Yeah, it's bizarre. But for
but
me, the James Caan one hit me the hardest, because I was like, wow. And even though I mean, Godfather, one of my favorite movies. When I think of James Caan, it's always Rollerball. I have no idea why, because when I was younger, it was such an impressionable movie for me. I was just like, I love that movie back then, and he was like a god back then to me, because I thought that was just the best movie of all time back then.
Nice.
Yeah, it's so yeah, it was kind of sad on his passing. Kind of makes you feel about your own mortality.
Yeah.
But I start looking at the age, you go, oh, getting up there.
Yeah. Well, you know, talking about people making a big impression on you in your youth, you know, that reminds me, your description of that reminds me of like my Rutger Hauer like fascination that occurred like from seeing Blade Runner for the first time, right? And his whole like Tears in Rain speech at the end of that movie, like that was another one of those ones where it's like I saw him in a bunch of other contexts after that, obviously some of which were very silly, but like that was one that always like stuck with me, right? Where it's like, oh man, this guy can actually really act.
Yeah, it's funny when you think about Rutger. I mean, that's his prize movie, but for me, another one that when I always think of him, I think of him in The Hitcher.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
He's just the baddest badass there. He's just a psychopath. I mean, that always stuck with me. You know, people talk about Silence of the Lambs and all these great things. So yeah, try going up against this guy.
Yeah, nice. Good times.
Yeah.
So what this post really did for me, though, was it kind of got me thinking about all this mafia, organized crime type stuff in fiction, right? Because it's so pervasive throughout like so many different mediums, right? Like books, TV, film, all that sort of thing. And even just thinking about those three properties, right, represented by those three actors, right? Like Goodfellas, Godfather, Sopranos, right? And it made me think like, what's your favorite mafia themed or organized crime themed thing, you know, book, movie, TV, whatever. I know I have a couple of ideas about that, but I'd be curious to hear some of yours. I know it's probably too hard to pick one.
For crime, or I mean, I'd have to go with The Godfather. I've watched it so many times, but kind of an offshoot of that, sort of like not mafia but gang related. The Warriors is probably is another movie from my past that just when it came out just stuck with me. It made such a huge impression. So sort of, it's like, I guess I don't even know what you'd call it. Pseudo crime, pseudo gang.
Yeah, gang. Yeah, sort of New York gang type vibe, but like also almost kind of tongue in cheek in some ways.
Yeah. It was I found a very powerful movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole Godfather mythos is interesting. It would be my go-to. What about you?
Well, I was going to say, much like, you know, when we were talking about the Mel Brooks stuff last episode, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that, you should totally go watch it because it was great. I would say I'd go with maybe what would be somewhat unpopular choice with the mob movies and go with Casino, which I have seen probably more than any of the others. I love that movie and the way that it's put together with like De Niro's narrations and like the way a lot of the scenes are set up and the way a lot of the transitions happen and just the framing of everything. Like I think that's such an easy movie to watch like over and over again and pick out like little details and like really like little bits of excellence in the execution of it. Not that the other films I just mentioned don't have that as well, but for whatever reason, like there's certain movies that I can just watch pretty much from any point to the end when I see them on the screen, right? Like, I think like Pulp Fiction is a good example of that for me, or Aliens. You know, it's like real, true, like big classic films. And for whatever reason, in that like sort of mafia crime movie genre, Casino definitely does that for me.
Yeah, well, it was a really good movie, and there were so many layers to it. The relationship had to deal with which was very volatile. The whole the mafia thing also very volatile. Yeah, it was a really good movie. And there was some pretty gruesome deaths in that one.
Yeah. Again, like old movies, so this isn't really that much of a spoiler, but I mean, you can't really talk about Goodfellas and or Casino without talking about, does anybody get whacked better than Pesci?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Reservoir Dogs, another one that I
Mhm.
really like talking about crime. Yeah, that one just I like actually it's the point where I like to watch it just to study it, like to see how the dialogue and how it flows. I mean, it's almost like a theater play. So
Mhm.
that would be one of my favorites too. I mean, Pulp
Yeah.
Fiction's is blew my mind when I saw it, but Reservoir Dogs, I just the compactness of it, the writing, just I don't know, everything about it just seemed it was really magic. So yeah,
Mhm.
that would be another pick of mine.
For sure. And I mean, like,
Even
so many iconic scenes in Reservoir Dogs, right? Like the opening diner scene with the whole Madonna speech, and then
yeah,
like talking about telling the story about going undercover and telling a good story to like be convincing undercover and that whole thing with the cops in the bathroom, and the
yeah,
drug sniffing dog and all that. Like
yeah,
there's so much good stuff in there.
yeah, yeah. It's an unbelievable movie. Another movie I'll have to pull out and watch again.
Yeah.
So many movies, such little time.
Indeed. Well, that's always the debate, right? Is it do you go back and watch something you've already seen before, or do you try to find something new? Because it's like awesome, it's always awesome to find something new, but if
Yeah,
you do watch something new and you end up disappointed by it, you're like, oh man, I should have just watched Pulp Fiction again, or
yeah,
Casino again, or
yeah.
whatever.
Well, it's sometimes an easy choice because especially during COVID, there was nothing was being shot, and there was weeks when I check out to see what was new releases on the streaming, and it was like nothing. They were bringing out 20 new films from Bollywood because they had literally nothing coming out of the Hollywood pipeline, kind of thing. So
Hmm.
it. So I mean, if there's something new coming out, sure. I always love watching something new, but sometimes the week comes and there's just no good new releases. So always have the good standbys.
Yeah. Well, and another good thing about those classic films is like there's so much in-depth analysis of them at this point, right? Because people have had the opportunity to really pick them apart and go over them with a fine-tooth comb, which
Yeah,
actually kind of leads us into a sort of related thing, which is uh, a video I came across recently about Peter Clemenza and why he was written out of The Godfather Part Two,
yeah,
which I thought was pretty interesting and well done YouTube video that I wanted to give a shout out to.
yeah. It was really interesting, actually.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to check that one out?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
watched it. Yeah, to find out basically this was all about money,
Hmm.
as it always is. The actor didn't want, wasn't happy with it, so they just wrote him out.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
guess,
actually a kind of a cool video because he did like a two-parter, right? Like he talks about in one video, he talks about the character itself and like the different possible fates of him. And then he has another video where he kind of breaks down the behind the scenes drama of why all that stuff played out the way it did. And I found them both really interesting and sort of nicely executed. That's a really good channel in general, though. That CineRanter channel. I've seen plenty of good stuff. And I think if you're into the sort of mafia, organized crime films in general, that's a topic and an area that he really spends a lot of time on. So there's a lot to dig into there.
well, apparently he spends a lot of time on it because some of his theories, I was just thinking, he thinks a lot about these things. Sometimes really stretching some of the
Yeah.
some of the theories, but I was like, I'm gonna spend a lot of time watching them and trying to figure out stuff.
But he even makes a joke about it in one of those Clemenza videos where he's like, why did they put this in here? Maybe so some bored YouTuber could talk about it 50 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good stuff though. I enjoy that.
Yeah. There's so many cool things now with YouTube and stuff where they break down the movies and the theories and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So just on the topic of Mafia, have you watched all the Sopranos?
So I had a bit of a falling out with the Sopranos at a certain point where I was pretty into it for the first few seasons, and then they kind of lost me at about I forget, it was like season 3 or season 4. I kind of lost steam with it and never really got back into it until the last couple seasons were airing, and I kind of caught up. So there's some stuff I haven't seen from the middle, basically, that I probably should go back and watch at some point because I'm sure it would help contextualize some things.
Yeah.
But it's one of those series where I haven't really sat down and studied it from beginning to end because there's kind of that gap in the middle for me.
All right. So you saw the last final episode.
Yeah, I have seen
because that was going to be where I'm leading my question. I was like, what did you think?
Okay.
One, so did you like it? Or 2, do you think he died?
Okay. So I was going to say we're going into spoiler territory, but again, 20-year-old show at this point, so whatever.
I was going to say.
So I actually did like it. I actually thought it was pretty cool because I do think he died. And I think that was kind of the point of it, right? Is that he's lived this life of brutality and where things just happen right on the turn of a dime, and because there's so much setup for the idea that he could have gotten whacked in that scene, right? And I think that would be how it would be, right? It would just be he's sitting there having dinner with his family, and all of a sudden, bang, you're done. And I think to me that felt very intentional, and it felt that was fitting and how it should have been for the kind of life that he led. Because that to me is always one of the interesting things about the mafia and organized crime stuff in fiction is I think one of the things that it always really has to show to feel authentic and meaningful to me is the downward spiral, right? The fact that these lives that these people either are born into or choose or led into by circumstances or whatever, for whatever good might come from them, they are inevitably these tragic, flawed, awful scenarios that end up unfolding. And I think that always has to be for me the takeaway from that, because I never like when that stuff is just sort of straight up glamorized and portrayed as being some kind of idyllic lifestyle or some kind of desirable lifestyle. I think you have to show all of the bad of it too, to make it totally meaningful.
Because at first, when it happened, at first I was like, what? Just the black screen. I was like, what? I think I actually got up and looked around the TV to see if it was plugged in. I thought I'd lost. I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. And then at first I just sat there and I wouldn't say I was pissed off. I thought, well, what kind of a garbage ending is that? But then I thought about it, and I agree with you. I thought he was killed. And then the more I thought about it, I said, well, what's more brutal? He obviously was killed in front of his family. How horrible it must have been for the family. And then you wonder, was it just him? Because there's a lot of killings in the show where husband and wife both got it, and so I they couldn't have really shown that because the kids were there. So the more I thought about it, I thought, if you buy into that he did die, then I thought it was a good ending, because you just kind of chilled that he got it in front of his family, which is kind of brutal.
Yeah, to me that's the only ending that is satisfying and makes sense. To me, to even consider it being just a cut without that being the result or the reason for the cut, would be really unsatisfying, right? But I guess that's the kind of the beauty of it, is that it is left to interpretation, and you can put whatever spin on it you want to put on it. But to me, that's the way it has to be in my mind to be good.
Great series.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good finale. I felt like it brought it home, especially in that last season, really nicely. And it made me kind of feel good about picking it up again at the end. And like I said, I probably will go back at some point and catch the episodes that I missed in the middle. But for whatever reason, I think sometimes with those sorts of storylines, and I think this is just an issue I have with a lot of series in general. I feel like sometimes they drag their feet narratively a little bit, and in terms of like character development and progression and stuff like that. And I sometimes get a little bit bored if I feel like things aren't really advancing or moving. I think the classic example of that for me is like The Walking Dead, where I was like super into it for the first several seasons, and then at a certain point, it just kind of ran out of steam for me, and I stopped kind of caring. And some of the decisions they made and some of the things they did really just ended up turning me off to it completely at a certain point.
Well, every season it was like, oh look, we solved our problem, we won. Next season, oh look, there's a new group of humans that are scum and want to kill you. And it was like literally, it was the same storyline, just a different group. And so it started to wear a bit thin.
So that's kind of a good like little offhanded question, right? Like, what do you think is the ideal number of seasons for a good, like tightly executed television show narrative, right? Like a 1 hour drama, like, because to me, I feel like 3 to 5, like a good 3 to 5 season story arc, I think works really well for most shows.
Because it did keep it fresh. I mean, it really depends how good your writer's room is, I guess, because some of them could just keep churning out stuff. It gets to the point when they have a really good concept, but then after a couple seasons, they're just throwing crap at the wall just to keep it going, because it's a money machine. I mean, X-Files went on for almost a decade. And I found I liked it all the way to the end. It was one of my great series.
Yeah, I think there are definitely some standouts, definitely some things that have had really long runs that have been consistently good. I just think that's really hard to pull off, right? Like you have to have some real magic going, in your pressure cooker of creativity there to make that happen consistently.
I think you'd have to have really lucky to have good actors. That makes a big difference too, to be able to pull it off. Because if you're just relying on whatever the shtick is for the story and the actors are kind of average, then it's the idea will buy you a bit of time, but it'll slowly fade.
No, definitely true. So speaking of good ideas, I think one of the things we learned from our previous episode is that people like two things. They like dogs and they like intense guitar playing. And it occurs to me, the only thing that would be better than that is to combine them. So I had the guys in the lab working on this the past couple of weeks. See how this grabs you. So speaking of books, I know you read something recently that you're
Yeah,
pretty
actually,
excited about.
I finished Below by Laurel Hightower. It was a great book, and well, it's a novella, and it's about this character that just broke off with the relationship, was doing something on her own. She was going to do it on her own, prove everything to herself, and all hell breaks loose. It was a it was a seat of the pants ride. I couldn't actually put it down. It was a pretty quick read. Really enjoyed it. What made me think about it was because I just saw an interview that she did with Horror Tree, where she's talking about novellas and the sweet spots. And I was thinking, because I'm just finishing a novel now, and it took a lot out of me. And I was thinking, novels would probably be or a novella would be a really good size to try next, kind of thing. And so I was thinking, talking about novellas, and how would I put some? I mean, I had a little novella in my short story collection, but I might give that a try. And after reading Laurel's newest one, I thought it was the perfect. The pacing was great, because with horror too, it can drag on, and I think almost like a novella is like a perfect size, I think, for horror. It's kind of like the 90-minute horror movie. Yeah, and after after reading the interview, I was thinking a lot about that, thinking it might be my next project. And after reading Laurel's book, I thought it was a perfect example of why it works so well.
I've definitely become a big fan of the short novel, long novella sort of bracket, right? Because a lot of my stuff falls into that like 40 to 50,000 word bracket. So technically a novel, but if you're calling that a novel, it's on the short side. Or if you're calling it a novella, it's kind of on the long side. Because I believe the quote unquote official cut for a novel was 40,000 words or more. If you want to get textbook about it. But I do agree that I think like works in that range, like in that general ballpark, are very attractive for a bunch of different reasons. I think especially if you're exploring like a new author, somebody you've never read before, it's a nice length to get a good taste of their style without like having a major time commitment to experiencing whatever they're putting out there.
Yeah. I mean, some of Stephen King's strongest works were his novellas. So
and you just don't think of them that way because usually you're experiencing them as like in a collection of 4 or more, right? And so it's this big beefy book, but it really is like 4 or 5 nice compact tight stories.
I mean, they are a bit long novellas, but yeah, his novella type, I enjoyed them a lot more than some of the other ones, except for the earlier ones. But yeah, so big shout out to Laurel, because it was really great book, and it really got me thinking about novellas and what can be done in that size of a read. So
when I saw a little bit of the blurb on that one, and I was kind of intrigued by the fact that it made reference to the Mothman legend. So is that like something that features prominently in that, or is that more of like a vague sort of reference, or just like a
no, it's a major player.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. We were talking about movies and stuff earlier, and definitely Mothman Prophecy. I know some people are not fans of it, but that's a good go-to flick for me that I've seen several times as well.
Yeah, that's with Richard Gere, right?
Yeah.
That was surprisingly a good one. I didn't really think I was going to like it, and actually it was a really good movie.
Nice. So speaking of good stuff that was surprising. I actually read something recently also, which was a short story or short fiction anthology that was put together by a YouTuber named Cam Wolfe
Right.
called We're Not Home. And this is an interesting collection because it's got a few different things going on. One of which being that all of the stories in it are by YouTubers or booktubers or author tubers. So people with, fairly substantial YouTube channels and followings and whatnot who all got together under sort of Cam's direction and put this collection together as a charity effort for this charity in Australia called Books in Homes. So one of the cool, nice upshots to this thing is that all of the proceeds from it are going to this literacy based charity. But the even nicer thing about it is that the stories are actually pretty good, and the book is pretty well put together and nicely organized. And I actually had quite a bit of fun reading through it and getting to see all these different sort of takes on all these different horror / speculative fiction genres that are sort of covered in it. I think there's about 13 or 15 stories in the thing. It's pretty beefy, and some of the stories are fairly long. And there were definitely some that I liked a lot more than others, or thought were a lot, for lack of a better term, better than others. But I found most of them to be really pretty engaging and interesting, and definitely worthwhile. And even some of the stories that I wasn't super into had moments, right? Because I always think that's a good thing, right? Even if a story is not really grabbing you, if there's some aspect of it that you can look at it and say, oh, this is a clever bit of prose, or that's a funny line of dialogue, or a clever little plot wrinkle, or whatever. I think pretty much all of the stories had at least something going for them,
Right.
which was pretty cool.
It's always nice to find a collection and that you actually enjoy them. Find so many of them are sort of hit and miss, because I'll find you always see them through BookBub or some promo through Amazon or whatever. It's oh, free collection or whatever, and I'll go, oh, check it out, and then it's just not what you were hoping for.
Yeah, it's always nice too whenever you see something I really like the sort of multi-author anthologies, because then you get a little sampling of a bunch of different people, right? Because I think I had read maybe one or two of the authors that were featured in this one previously, and then the rest of them were all completely new to me. So it's always nice to get that sample or that taste of other people's writing styles, and kind of see if you want to add yet more to the never-ending TBR pile. I guess that's the downside to it, but I'm always game to find new people to try out.
Is it a themed anthology?
It is actually a themed anthology. It is the theme of it is that everybody's on vacation and they're away from home, right? So they're the whole we're not home thing, right? So some people are out on a tropical island, some people are wandering around in the woods, some people are on a trip for work or whatever. And so that's kind of the consistent theme that runs through all the stories, which was pretty cool. I didn't feel like it really was absolutely necessary, but it was nice. And I guess if you're into a beach read or something you're going to read on vacation, that might be a fun one, because it might mess with your head a little bit.
Yeah. So, make you look over your shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So some of the stories definitely lean into that prompt or lean into that topic more than others. Some of them, the whole we're on vacation thing or we're not home thing is a little more tenuous, but it's definitely present in all of them.
Yeah.
But
cool. I like the theme ones are always kind of interesting, because it kind of tightens the idea pool, and to see what each writer comes up with when they all have the same sort of theme put before them. So
Yeah, because it's one thing to write when everything's just kind of open-ended, right? And you can just do whatever you want. But even if just putting a simple limitation on something and saying, this has to be this genre, or it has to have this theme or this, element to it, can really produce some interesting results, right? Because
Yeah.
necessity is the mother of invention and whatnot, right?
Talking about with themes and stuff, there's so many anthologies. It's always fun to find authors that are big names that are in anthology, especially older ones.
Yeah.
And it's there was one the other day I was going through and I saw an old story by Joe Lansdale.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an author that actually had a major influence on my writing. Of course, everyone, Stephen King, James Herbert, The Rats was actually my first book. But when I read The Drive-In by Joe Lansdale, it was basically, I thought, this is something completely different. And it just opened and go, you can do so much more in the horror. It's not all about, scary mansions and stuff. So I started reading a bunch of Joe Lansdale after that. Now, of course, he writes everything from Westerns to crime drama. He's got the Hab and Leonard, you've probably heard, series. Yeah, he's one of the most diverse writers that I know. But yeah, The Drive-In. Are you familiar with that book at all? Or
no, I'm actually a little embarrassed to say I've never read any of his stuff. Despite having heard of him multiple times over the years, he just never made it to the top of my pile for one reason or another. But having seen that interview now, I kind of feel like I need to fix that.
Yeah. It was a great interview with Paper Cuts. It's another podcast that I enjoy watching with Brad Proctor and Jay from The World According to Jay. Actually, they both have their own podcast as well. Brad Proctor does his, doing his book reviews, and Jay does his book reviews, and they each actually post paper cuts through their own. Because I remember when I first found out, I was trying to look for a paper cuts like YouTube channel, and I was, why can't I find this anywhere? I mean, I could find it on Spotify, which I listen to when I'm going for my walks and stuff, but I couldn't find it anywhere else. And then that's when I noticed that they had it on their own channels. But both of them do a lot of great book reviews. So I follow both of them because I steal a lot of their ideas, and I get a lot of book ideas on stuff to read by watching what they're reading, because they seem to have their finger on the pulse for stuff. But together they do paper cuts, and the interview with Joe Lansdale was a really, really fun interview. And hopefully it opened up your world to his stuff.
The stuff that they did with that, with like the little graphics and the quiz where they were like quizzing him on his own books and stuff like that. Yeah. Some of that stuff was really fun.
Yeah. No, it's he's interesting. Have you watched any of the Hab and Leonard series?
I have not. I'm definitely intrigued by it, though, from what I learned about it from that interview. I think it's definitely something that I probably would be interested in checking out. I just have not had occasion to.
You can watch the series, see if it's your type, and then you can move into the books from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the Drive-In is, it's just it's mind bending. It's just everyone's at a drive-in, and like the world sort of disappears all around it. So it's only people left are in this drive-in, and having to survive with just what you have at a drive-in.
Yeah.
And then other bizarre things happen that are also, it's one of a kind read. But
nice.
But yeah, Joe Lansdale's is a great writer. Paper Cuts is a great channel. They're Brad and Jay. I Holly Ray Garcia, they did an interview with her as well, which is another one, and they just did one with Gabino Iglesias and Megan. Actually, I wrote it down somewhere. Megan Lucas. She's Canadian, I think.
Oh, nice.
But yeah,
Bonus points.
I've been watching a lot of their interviews lately, trying to catch up on all the ones that I've missed in the past.
Nice.
I've subscribed, so I don't miss anything. As people should hit the subscribe button in ours, because you don't want to miss anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely regret sometimes that I don't have more time to watch more shows and more stuff like that. But I always try to catch anything like that whenever I can. Like, because even though I had never read any of Lansdale's stuff, like I've definitely been familiar enough with his name over the years that when I saw him pop up as a guest on there, I'm like, I need to watch that. maybe that will inspire me and, like, you know, take me over the tipping point to actually let that stuff percolate up on my TBR a little bit. And I feel like it definitely had that effect for me, right? Like sitting and watching that interview and listening to him talk about his career and his, you know, motivations and why he writes the way he does and choices that he's made and stuff like that. I feel like a good interview like that can really do a lot to help you connect with the author in a way as a reader and like really pique your interest and help you get like more excited about the idea of, you know, interacting with that person's work. So I always like to try to catch stuff like that whenever I can.
Yeah. And a lot of it too, when they talk and I mean, it may sound silly, but it doesn't make you feel so alone as a writer, because you're like, they say something and you go, oh, I did that, but I thought that was just ridiculous, or I never would tell anyone that I did that. And they say, well, and then you find out a lot of the other authors, they do the same things, or they believe the same things, and it just it makes sort of the world a bit closer. You don't sort of feel so far out in your little cubby doing your writing on your own. You go, oh, they feel the same way, kind of thing. So that's why the writer interviews are always interesting to me.
Yeah. It's just that sort of kinship, right? Or that sort of connection that you get of like, this person is doing the same thing that I'm doing, and they might be doing it in a completely different way, but there's still some commonalities there, right? There's still some touchstones and some things where that will inevitably resonate with you. And I think that's just a really cool thing. I know as I've gotten deeper into this stuff and I've interacted with more and more people in the writing community, I just feel that more and more, right? That there's a lot of overlap there that's reassuring in a lot of ways.
And sometimes they have really good ideas that you can steal. Not story ideas, but writing techniques or, you know, ways to market and stuff. So, yeah, but it's like you said, there's just not enough time in the day to watch and read everything that you want to.
Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of what we're here for, right? We're here to help people find cool things that they might have missed, right?
Yep.
Right.
That's it. Hit that subscribe button.
Nice. So speaking of cool ideas that I might rip off if I had more time to do so, I wanted to make sure we talk about this new thing that Steve Talks Books is doing, which I thought was a pretty cool idea, which he's calling Short Story Saturday. Have you had a chance to check that out? I think you did, because you posted about it.
Yeah, I just read Jeff Carter. I listened to Jeff Carter's story, Message in a Bottle. And they're really compact stories. They're not long ones, you know, they're like 5 minutes. And I was listening to this one, and Steve does a great job reading it. And as I was going along, I was going, oh, okay, it's so short. I'm trying to think of what to say without spoiling anything. It's just, but
well, let me
Okay, go ahead.
Let me just throw this out there. I think the thing that I like the most about that story is you think you have a very clear idea in your head of what the story is going to be based on the initial setup.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about it is that it plays with that, right? Like it doesn't give you exactly what you think you're going to get from the way it's set up, which I really liked.
Yeah. I want to say so much more, but I can't. I think that it summed it up. It was like when it ended, I was like, "Oh, that was clever."
Yeah,
Was
definitely,
clever.
definitely.
And,
And I think we can say safely, without ruining anything, that the whole setup of the story is that it's a guy marooned on an island, right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of what comes about as a result of that. But I guarantee it is not typical guy marooned on an island story. And maybe we can, maybe that's enough to entice people.
Yeah, it's clever. It just I was envious actually. I was thinking, oh, I wish I had to come up with that. It was just so compact and I was engaged in the story and I was like, okay, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And then I thought, well, how is he gonna pull this off? And then I thought that it was just so smooth. It was so clever.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, right? Because you're sitting there watching it and you see the little progress bar on the audio file ticking away, right? It's ticking. And it's like, oh, this is only got like a minute left. Where's he going with this? And then it hits you and you're like, oh, yes. Well played, sir. Well played.
Yeah. Because for me too, I'm with my stories, my short stories, they're longer. I have one really short story in my collection, but I seem to have it's like this writer's diarrhea or something. I keep writing it out, and I really love to write something shorter because something's been catching my eye is these collections of flash fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to pick up some of those because I'd like to see. There was one I saw, but then when I opened it, it was like flash fiction, but it was like still 8 or 9 pages long. And I was looking like, well, I want to see really flash. I want to see how
like 500
together.
Words. Yeah.
Because my brain doesn't really work that way. So I want to kind of take a look at it and see how they do it. Because it's mesmerizing. And this is a perfect example of compact writing. It was just he's gifted. Do you read any flash fiction?
I dabble with it here and there. I don't really necessarily go out of my way to seek it out, but I will say, ever since I've been getting more into like some of these audio programs, right? Like some of these, things with people doing stuff with it, I'm getting more and more exposed to it. Because we talked about a couple of shorter pieces last time, and I just see them. I think it's one of those things where once you start seeing them, you start noticing them more and more. Like I think they were always there, and I just never really paid as much attention to them as I do now.
Yeah,
because I think that they're good examples of things to talk about in the context of something like this. And again, with shorter works, I think that's a great point of entry for exposure to a new writer, right?
Yeah.
You get a little taste of somebody's style, like without much of a time commitment.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's I guess like poets, because there's a few that I follow and I see their poems and stuff, and it's to be able to the brevity of being able to get your thought and your idea down in such a short format. It's kind of interesting.
Well, and like other venues too, like song lyrics, right? Like the idea of like, I only have what's effectively like a paragraph's worth of text, but I need to tell you a story, effectively. I always find that really helpful to think in terms of that level of efficiency, right? Because if a person can tell a story in a 3-minute song, you can definitely tell a story in a couple of pages.
Yeah. Apparently I can't, but I want to try. I'm gonna follow Laurel's example. I'm gonna try my novella. I'm gonna ease my way down into short stuff.
Nice.
I'd like to. I had this story. It just it sort of captivated me. It made me think a lot of what I want to write or how I want to write. And can I make something this compact? Probably not. That's not really my wheelhouse, but I'll give it the good old try.
Nice. So speaking of giving things the good old try, that's something you do quite often when you're playing a video game. And as promised, we're going to talk about some more video games, people. You ready for this? You ready?
Who wouldn't be? It's video games.
I'm super excited. Now, I know you have one in particular you want to mention, which makes a lot of sense based on your background with the hobby. So why don't you kick us off with that?
All right. Well, actually, being prepared and only half prepared, doing my 3D here. It took me a while to dig this up.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
It's like the original.
Very
I didn't even know if I had it. And not only that, it's the director's cut. I don't even can see it.
Yeah, no, we got
director's cut. Yeah, it was. I dug long and hard for this one.
Nice.
But I guess apparently, like I think we mentioned in the last episode, I'm a pack rat. I don't throw anything away. May take me a while to find it, but Resident Evil. Well, it's such a franchise now. The video game, the movies, the TV series, the animation, but it all stemmed from that initial video game. And I remember that when the first time I played it, well, there was nothing really like it. It was just the whole survivor horror concept was just totally captivating to me. Spent many nights in the dark, because you got to play it in the dark. Just roaming through that mansion, never wondering what's going to be popping out of the doors. It's
the dogs, dude. The dogs.
Yeah.
The first time the dogs come through the window, that is that's how you know you're a video game enthusiast, right? Like if you have that memory of like nearly like jumping out of your skin the first time the dogs come through the window.
Yeah, it was, and it was kind of different too, because you're sort of looking at your character third person kind of thing, and it's not like the gun that I had been used to. Is just you're moving the character, and then trying to get used to doing that when like things are constantly coming through doorways and cages that look locked that all of a sudden burst open, and dogs that are like jumping out everywhere.
And how about this, right? How about a game with a gun in it where you only have 5 bullets at the time, most of the time, right?
Yeah. Well, it's such an interesting concept. It's like, you got to find weapons, you got to put together, medicines and stuff. And it's just, I mean, you can find something, but you got to like mix this with this. It was kind of interesting. My strength exactly wasn't when they had you came to a wall and there was like some kind of puzzle. I usually didn't have the patience for that. I'd do it, or I'd like, use some kind of cheat sheet. Because back then, it wasn't just like Google either. I mean, you had to go to like a forum or something and find, see if someone else had did it. And they'll go, it's 5 to the left, 7 to the right. But yeah, it's because I wanted to jump back in. I wanted to go exploring, but you'd come to this wall and you'd have to figure out whatever. It was like an escape room almost before you could move on. And trying to find save points was another something that was very frustrating. If you didn't hit it and you died, and then you ended up somewhere where you didn't want to have to go through it all again. But
so obviously there's been a ton of these games over the years, right? And there's kind of like a pretty hard divide from like Resident Evil 4 forward versus like what came before Resident Evil 4, right? Stylistically and like how the games are kind of put together. So like what would you say of the ones you've played? I guess first have you played them all, and B, of the ones you've played, what would you say is your favorite?
Oh, I'd always have to go for the first one because I'm just so fond of it. Fond memories. It was just the idea was fresh. There's been so many that I can't even. They all bunch up in my mind. I can't even think of it. There was like Nemesis. The Resident Evil 2 was pretty good. 4.
4 is kind of divisive, I feel like, because it's a very different kind of game, right? It's way more actiony than the previous ones.
It was pretty good. Because 1 and 2 were good. 3 and like Nemesis.
So one of my personal favorites from the originals, because I had a Sega Dreamcast, and one of the big exclusive games on that system for a long time was Code Veronica, which was, I think that takes place between 3 and 4 chronologically in the series. But that was definitely a good one.
Yeah. Because now you got me in my brain going through all of them, and they're all getting confused. So 4, that's when he's in the town,
the little village,
the Eastern European town. Yeah.
That
was really good graphically. I think they'd really stepped it up. The graphics were
because that's
really
where they kind of went
one.
with the over the shoulder, like more like traditional third person shooter kind of presentation. Right. That was kind of where it moved more back into that like in close camera view instead of being like the more distant kind of cinematic camera.
There's
So have you played any of the newest ones like Village or any of the stuff that's been released in the past few years?
I have played one, and I'm trying to think of the name, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it is.
Because there's 7, and then Village, I guess, is the newest one that just came out.
I haven't played the newest one.
I think the last one that I played the demo for 6, Resident Evil 6, and I don't think that I've played one since then. But I have been curious about 7 and Village, just because they both look so impressive visually, because they're obviously like cutting edge tech, right? And the whole presentation of them looks so enticing, just the fidelity of them. But I'll admit it, I'm a little bit of a fraidy cat at this point when it comes to the survival horror games. Like I used to be a lot more up for that sort of thing, but I kind of got wrecked by things like Amnesia and Penumbra Overture and like some of those really hardcore ones like Outlast and stuff like that. And those things kind of broke me of wanting to have those kind of experiences.
Right.
So I have not been super eager to jump on that train lately.
Yeah. Well, I haven't found anything all that new. I mean, the gameplay's fun, the graphics are fun, but 4 I liked, but they never really regained the excitement of like the first ones. It was just the whole idea behind Raccoon City, how it all happened, the surviving through the. Now it's just like, okay, well, you're just fighting zombies. It could be just like a Resident Evil, a Walking Dead video game kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing's really struck me that I'd continue.
A big problem that I run into lately with games is like it really has to be something special for me to want to make the time to play a single player game, right? Because for me, a lot of times my sort of gaming time is sort of mixed in with my social time, right? Because I'll get online and play with friends, and we'll be chatting and talking and socializing or whatever. And the game is just kind of there, as a framework for that, right? It's the meeting place, or it's the the place where we just get together to talk and have a good time.
Right.
And really for me, I probably only play at this point maybe, I don't know, a handful, like two to five single player games a year, which is like nothing compared to what I used to do. So for me, like, to make the time to for a game to be one of those handful of games that I play a year that's single player, it has to be something really special. But I don't know. Like I said, the new Resident Evil stuff I think is definitely appealing, at least in that sense that it has me a little bit curious just to see where the series is at this point, because it has been a minute since I've engaged with it. So I think I might check one of those out at some point.
Yeah, I'd have to take a look, see, because I'm not familiar with the new ones, so I'd have to see what they're doing.
I know there was a lot of memes floating around recently about like the crazy tall giant lady, I guess, who's in the newest one. I guess she's like a pretty major character. And I know like at the video game awards last year, the actress who played that character got like an award basically for being intimidating or scary or something like that. So that was kind of cool.
I did see a trailer on that, and she is kind of interesting looking.
Yeah.
So I'll have to look into it further.
Nice.
So if you're not, playing any new Resident Evil games, you got anything that you're looking at?
Yeah. Well, I dabble a lot, and one thing I will say is sometimes I'll look at a game and kind of decide whether or not I really want to get serious about it later. And that's kind of what happened to me with this one that I think is a good one to talk about, because it kind of ties into the organized crime stuff we were talking about previously, which is Empire of Sin.
Okay,
which is basically a simulation strategy game set in 1920s Chicago during Prohibition, where you basically get to play as a crime lord, and then to kind of run your speakeasies and your brothels and all this sort of casinos and all that sort of stuff. And then you sort of have like a real-time map of the city that's kind of playing out around you. And then whenever combat ensues, or whenever you interact with a building or go to do something specific, time will stop and it'll become turn-based, so you can kind of take your time and strategize about what you want to do. So like if somebody comes to knock over your speakeasy or whatever, you get to actually play that combat out in a turn-based manner, sort of like akin to something like XCOM or Jagged Alliance or any of those classic like turn-based, squad-based strategy games. And the other interesting thing about that one is it's actually made by Romero Games, that is John Romero's studio, who was one of the people behind the original Doom, which we talked about last time. Yeah. So a nice little tie-in there. But that game, I have some mixed feelings about. I actually really dig it and think it's really cool conceptually. And I actually think most of the execution of it is really good, but it could definitely use a bit more content and a bit more patching to like clean up some technical rough edges in it. And I know they're kind of on the hook with their publisher to do one more expansion pack, because basically when that game came out, they sold like a gold edition of it that promised 2 expansions to people who purchased that. Right. And they haven't released the second expansion pack yet. So I'm hoping that when that happens, it'll clean up some of those sort of lingering technical issues and really make the game like live up to its full potential. Because like it's pretty darn good where it is right now, barring a couple little issues. But if they could just tidy it up and add a little more content, they'd have a real winner on their hands with that one, I think.
It's interesting. There was a game years ago. I don't know what it was. It's either called The Godfather or just called Mafia. And you play
those are both
as the
games.
gangster. Okay.
Yes. Those
I
are
was
both
mixing
games which I have played.
because I called my son last night and I was like, I was looking for them, but I can't find them. And I said, were they on like a Nintendo or were they on Wii? It's 'cause we had
Yeah.
so many consoles when he was younger, and because I remember, yeah, when you wanted to save it, you had to get into the Corleone compound kind of thing to
Yeah, you had to pick up the
save.
phone, the pay
Yeah.
phone on the wall. Yeah, that was the Godfather game, which
Okay.
actually EA made that game, ironically,
Okay.
back when they were actually still doing interesting projects and not just regurgitating their franchises every year.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so well, yeah, when you'd mentioned it, I was thinking that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, this would probably be pretty cool if they'd updated it and did a really good job because it was it's kind of cool trying to, especially if it's base where you're actually trying to control your minions, to take over, pubs and stuff.
Yeah, so
It's
sort
an
of like the
interesting concept.
fundamental difference between Empire of Sin and Mafia and the Godfather game is that Mafia and the Godfather game are like real-time third-person action games, right? Where everything's
Yeah.
happening in real time, but you're like kind of limited to your own character's perspective on things, right? Like you're a foot soldier in this crime family doing missions and interacting with people in cutscenes and stuff like that. And those things happen in Empire of Sin, but what you also get in that game is sort of the overarching meta strategic aspect of it, right? Where you're literally controlling, how the organization is structured and where the money gets spent and who gets hired or who goes to work as a mole in somebody else's family to try to get information. And there's all these little side stories and stuff that happen depending on who's working for you. Like you might have a named character who's associated with your family and who's doing jobs for you or whatever, and then they might have like a little side story that gets triggered where you go and talk to them and leads you into this other little like narrative tangent based on who you have working for you and who the other families have working for them. There's a lot of little like interesting intricacies to that game, which is probably one of the reasons why it has some of the technical issues that it does, because it's a little more complex than like your typical game.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a give and take there, but I really appreciate what they did with it, right? Like you can tell, I wouldn't say it's like a triple A level game in terms of like production value, but like definitely like a high end double A game, right? Like it's right on that cusp of being like a big budget, title. So it's kind of a shame to me that game hasn't gotten more positive attention, but I definitely understand why, because it was in kind of a rough state when it first came out, and it's only been since they've updated it and improved it that it's really gotten to be more playable and more like close to what the vision of it was. But like I said, I'm kind of hoping that by the time they get that last expansion pack out, like they'll dot all their I's and cross all their T's, and you end up with like a really good game in the end. But that's when I played enough to get into it, enough to be excited about playing it, but I kind of almost want to put it on the shelf now and wait for that last patch and hope that gets it in the state where I'm ready to really dig into it more thoroughly.
Is it on console as well, or is it you play it on computer, I guess, right?
Yeah, I got it off of Steam, and I got it on a Steam. It usually goes down to like $10 on a Steam sale, which is nice, so it's not like a huge investment if you wait for a sale. And I want to say that came out for consoles as well, but I'm not sure about that. I'll verify that and put it on the screen for people so they can know what it's available on. I know for sure you can get it on PC and Mac on Steam, which is pretty cool. And I've actually played it on my M1 MacBook Air, and I can confirm that it does in fact run on at least that Mac. Because it's maybe not as fast or as pretty as it runs on my like loaded out gaming PC, but it runs surprisingly well, even that Mac version.
Yeah, because it's definitely a cool looking video game that I check out. But I play most of my stuff now on consoles.
Yeah,
if I have time between World of Tanks, but to play a Mafia would be cool, especially with the fact that you can just turn it off and not worry that you're going to be having dinner with your family and everything's going to go black on you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Low risk, high reward. That's what we're looking for in our video game adventures, I'd say.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, speaking of which, I think we have come to the end of yet another one of these.
Wow. Thank you, Canadian internet, for not crashing on me.
Right. I'm super excited. I was convinced that we were just going to have a Sopranos moment with your internet, but
yeah, and then everyone would have been thinking, oh, that's what they built it up to that, going the whole Sopranos thing, and then they did it to gag. And then, of course, I'd never come back.
Yeah.
And that would be the whole thing. Is that people go, well, did Ron really die? And that would be the whole topic. You know, is Ron really dead or is he alive? Yeah,
well, you'll have to tune in next month when we do another one of these to find out.
Congratulations. You just survived the Post-Mortem Report. For more information about the show, the hosts, or the things they talked about, check out our super swanky information page at anchor.fm/postmortemreport. Until next time, always remember, good posts never die.